Hello, everyone. Today is August 24th, 2022. This is the Kubernetes Data Protection Working Group meeting. So today we're going to go over CPT update. So Yvonne will give us an update. And I just want to give a quick update of Cozy status. That shouldn't take that long. So Yvonne, you can take it over. You want to share anything? Let me give you a
Yeah. Can you give me Zoom permissions to share?
Yes, okay. I stop sharing. I made you co-host.
Oh. Let me try. Okay. Can you all see my web browser?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, hi everybody. So 2 weeks ago, we talked about like the suggested like implementation of the aggregated API server in order to support like the change block records, large amount of them coming back from the backend storage provider. So just a quick recap, like so far, like we talk about like a deployment model where we have like a common, so looking at referring to this slide here, like we have a common external like pod, likely like a deployment workload that runs and serves the aggregated API server, and the aggregated API server will own like a custom resource type called volume snapshot delta, and that is like the I guess like the user or the backup software facing interface. And then the second component in our proposal involves like embedding like a CBT sidecar into the storage provider's CSI driver. And this sidecar primarily like has two functions. The first being that as the CSI comes up during its bootstrap, like the sidecar would register or broadcast itself via like a new like driver discovery CR, and in it like it will have information about like the name of the driver, and more importantly the information on how to for how the aggregated API server would connect to the CSI driver. And so the implication here is that like there will be a service resource, likely of type like cluster IP, sitting in front of the CSI driver. And then the sidecar would say, okay, I'm driver, foo.bar, and to find me, you will have to talk to this this service here. And then the aggregated API server would send like all the CBT requests to that service, and which proxy it to the CSI driver. And then from there, the sidecar would, upon receiving the CBT request, it will make like a CSI gRPC call to the storage provider CSI plugin within the same CSI driver. And then this is where like the plugin would know how to talk to the real like backend like CBT endpoint, and say, fetch me all the change block records between this base and this target volume based on the volume handles. So, and before I go into like where we last left off, like are there any questions around like this approach so far? Okay. Yeah, if anything comes up, just feel free to interrupt. And we appreciate to hear some thoughts and feedback from folks. And so during last meeting, like we left off with like the challenge that we encounter during like our prototype coding effort. And the challenge is that like we don't have like a reliable, a consistent and reliable way to persist like all these like custom resources into the Kubernetes etcd. like as you all know, like not all Kubernetes distribution like exposes their like SCD endpoint. And because we are implementing an aggregated API server, we can no longer tell like the Kubernetes API server that, hey, please go and persist all these custom resources that the user created into the Kubernetes SCD. The moment like our aggregated API server try to send such a kind of persistent request back to the Kubernetes API server, it will get into a loop. Like the Kubernetes API server was, oh, wait a minute, I thought you told me that you'd be responsible for everything about this custom resource, including the REST mapping and the storage persistence. So in our prototype, what we did was we spin up like an independent instance of SCD just to unblock ourselves. So like things, like the volume snapshot delta and the driver discovery, they all get persisted into that prototype SCD instance. And 2 weeks ago, we talked about how like persisting this driver discovery type is pretty straightforward. It can just be a CRD controller, like whether that controller run as a sidecar as part of our CBT's common server or common service workload, or run independently somewhere else. It's not that big of a discussion topic, at least not from last week. Seems to be a very straightforward implementation. The challenge is like volume snapshot delta. So it's like there were discussions around like, do we split the responsibility between an aggregated API server and some sort of controller? And if we do that, it seems potentially hard to reason about, like which component is responsible for which functionalities of the custom resources. And there was some discussion on Slack, like around how it's not uncommon to have like multiple watchers watch the same custom resource. But then again, and I think like so Dave, Carl, and we had a chance to like talk over this and chat more, and then like hoping to share some of our like discovery and learning with you all. I think right now we are leaning towards like not persisting the volume snapshot delta at all. So what we meant is like if we look at this next slide here, so starting with the backup software, like it can use like client Go to say to create like a volume snapshot delta custom resource, and then this would be sent as a post request over to our aggregated API server. And the key thing here is like the aggregated API server would just not bother to persist this resource at all. You got a post request, and inside the post request, it has a body of payload which contain all the parameters that we need. And then the aggregated API server would be able to retrieve the volume snapshot object, and then obviously what goes down to the volume snapshot content objects to retrieve things like the volume handles. And then it will also be able to retrieve the driver discovery resources. So you know where to send like all this like parameters to the CSI driver. And then of course like the main thing here is that like because we are not persisting the volume snapshot delta resources at all, like so like user won't be able to do something like kubectl create, and then they will be able to do something like kubectl create, but they won't be able to do something like kubectl get. The aggregated API server always said like this, it's not supported or resources are not found. At first it feels like a bit ill, weird, ugly, but having like dug deeper into some of the Kubernetes core resources, apparently this is not an uncommon pattern. One example that I found was really like something related to RBAC. So all this like subject access review, and as a matter of fact, everything under the authorization like API group, like all of them has a create REST method, but they do not persist anything at all. So so user would do something like kubectl create, and then the request would be intercepted, will be handled by API server, Kubernetes API server, and it just touch a bunch of things, like just really like RBAC validations and authorizations, and then send like the result back to the users, and without persisting anything. So I try playing with this example specifically on my terminal using kubectl. And yeah, if I do like kubectl create something like test SAR, subject access review, it creates it do a lot of processing and come back with a lot of response payload. But when I try to do the kubectl get again against the same resource name, it will just fail and say no, this is not supported. And rightly so. Like if we look at this REST structure or mapper of subject access review, like it support nothing but create. And then it's the same with like all the other, like a subject rules review, subject access review. So turns out it's pretty common, at least like in this particular package here. So it's a common approach. So it's not as weird as we thought it would be to begin with, for not persisting the custom resource. So how does that sound to folks? Any questions or feedback?
So, but does this satisfy the use case for the backup software? You just do a post and then you get what you need. Is that enough? I just want to look at the real use case and see if
I think like, and again, like especially folks on the call, especially if you'll be responsible for the backup software side, I would love to hear from you. I think really it's just on their side, it just goes down to like in your client client, you just create like you literally call like a create method to create the this object, and then wait for the payloads to come back. Shang-Chen, I think you raise your hand or something. You have questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Sure.
Yeah, the one thing that bothers me a little bit is it will make the backup software's idempotency nearly impossible only with API server. The main reason is that when imagine you're doing pagination, right? Let's say you have like millions of blocks changed. You need to the backup software need to literally remember where they were last time before calling the API for the next batch of blocks. If it crashes, then it cannot easily recover this information from API server, but instead they need to maintain this information somewhere else. If this is acceptable, I think it's fine, because what you were describing is not rare, as you mentioned. It's very typical, especially when you're implementing these webhook mechanisms. The mission that you're talking about, like the hook checks, right? Those are the request things. They're not saved in the API server at all.
Yes.
But I think this is slightly different though.
Yes, I think like I think even in the previous design, like we didn't account for like persisting like those like pagination data. So yeah, I think like again, I think like your point is valid. Like if like so like the backup software becomes responsible in knowing when, if there's an interruption, where to resume. I think like it's a bit of a trade-off there. I again just want to weigh like how much of this is like is acceptable, how much of it is a blocker. Because like I'm just trying to think here. Yeah, I think like
what's the
yeah.
the main harm of having it?
So again, so if we want to persist the volume snapshot delta kind object, like I mentioned, right? We at this point, like we are not able to find a way to reliably persist it into the Kubernetes SCD because the SCD endpoint might not be discoverable. Even if it does, there's a lot of like there are a bit of like authentication and authorization shenanigans that we have to jump through, right? Like say if you have like a pod, like there's no direct way for you to write into the SCD, the Kubernetes SCD endpoint because it may not be discoverable.
But this CBT aggregate API have to get from XCD anyways. So if it can do a gate, I suspect it can also do a put, right?
Not in this. So okay, here no, not quite. So it can get like so if we are talking about getting like other resource kind. So for example, in this slide, if we're talking about get like a driver discovery,
right?
If that is handled by a different CRD controller, then the client would it means like say if this is implemented using, for example, if we go back to here, right, in this diagram, I show like a different sidecar, which is a CRD controller that knows how to like that owns like the driver discovery or CRD. So because this is not an aggregated API server implementation, this is just a normal CRD controller. Like it can still like like tell the Kubernetes API server to persist that because I mean, like there's a difference between like the aggregated API server and the CRD controller. A controller like can still like tell the Kubernetes API server, please persist this. It's all part of the auto-generated code. With the aggregated API server is like you completely like override and hijacks like the endpoint, the type that we're talking about.
Sure, I get that, but just to be clear, right? So if I understand correctly, the regular API server and aggregate API server, it just matter of user interaction. The controller doesn't play too much here, right? I talk to API server directly and create a resource. Whether the controller kicks in or not, it's not impacting my flow. I as a user.
That's correct.
Anyway,
anyway,
I'm not trying to, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that it just feel to your point. I feel a little bit weird that some software running in Kubernetes will rely on something else that is persisted to maintain its idempotency, because the resource itself is not in the API server. So as long as this is okay with the backup software, I think we are fine. I mean, also backup software is not the only user of this API as well.
Yeah. I think like I want to clarify two things there. Like it is idempotent in the sense like as long as we send back the same base and target, and like so as long as the parameters are the same, the response would be the same, subjected to like the how the storage provider backend and what they return. So I think like your point is like the session part, right? Like how, like you can imagine, like we can imagine like inside the backup software there will be some logic, some sort of looping logic to say, am I done, are there more, do I cancel now? So exactly. I think I feel like even with like persisting it, I mean sorry, even without like even if we persist like the volume snapshot delta, say somewhere in some sort of storage, I'm just trying to envision like we actually save like the pagination data like into the resource. Like if we do say, if we like if we save it and then we say, okay, my status is like maybe the last time I did this was this. Like I just wonder if we would actually do something like that, you know, like
That's exactly what I meant. It's basically in the status field,
so
maybe put last offset or whatever it is. So
yeah,
that
but
exactly.
But I think like would we do that though? Like what if like it will stay like that forever though? Like how do you retrigger this? Like do you delete it, restart? I think there's just yeah, I think like there are more to be.
Retrigger meaning what?
So okay, so let's say if I finish, right? This is the end of it. There's no more blocks. So this object will stay like this inside SCD or whatever storage, like indefinitely, right? So if I want to retrieve this records again, what do I do? Do I delete it? Do I restart? Update it?
No. The status field is for backup software. It's not for the aggregate server, aggregate API.
So, yeah. So if the backup software wants to resend the request again,
sure.
What does it do?
It is yes, and in the spec it should say offset 0, right?
But the offset say so if it offset 0, and then that's it, and then it comes back and then it say the aggregated API server and said that's it. This is all the entries and that's it. No more. And this is what get persisted inside SCD, right? It will always stay as offset 0.
That's fine. That's totally cool.
So how do you retrigger and tell API server let's restart again? And even with this, I think there will still be some sort of okay. I'm just trying to think here. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, there are two pieces. Right? One is what the backup software is requesting, right? And that offset should goes into the spec. To your point, we should not remove that. That's what they request. And then the status field is really what last is returned, right? Maybe it's a bad idea. I mean, it just makes me feel more Kubernetes way of handling things. But I also understand this is a very special use case. Maybe we don't necessarily need to keep this and make it clear this is backup software's responsibility. You need to remember the last offset.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think, because like we might just end up with something like, say, if somehow like if the last call finish with something like that, right, and then it would always and then that's it, just one call and then we are done.
That's
and
fine.
this would always stay the same. This would always stay the same. Or like so I think like there's just not. I think there needs to be some way to indicate that, hey, I want to restart this. I mean like
restart is pretty straightforward, right? Just resend offset to 0. Then it should override whatever the status there. Anyway, I'm not trying to get into the details for this. Sorry about that.
No worries at all. I think like I think like the trade-off would be that we need to find some way to persist it, which so far like it seems to be a very like difficult like implementation, and at least like because we can't like reliably say we want, unless we want to roll our own like storage pod, which sounds like a bad idea. Like what we did with in the prototype, we create our own like a CD or whatever storage we want to choose. So does anyone have any thoughts and questions on this?
Another question is how, I'm just curious, if we're not persistent this, what would be the release look like?
What would the release look like? It would still be the so the sorry,
let me just try to explain what I was thinking. So the end user is expected to use client Go, basically some Go library, right?
Yep.
To communicate with the aggregate API server. There's no API per se, right? So volume snapshot delta is not persisted, but it's an API, like a CRD, but not necessarily a CRD, right? Now, the client Go and the volume snapshot data, they are combined together. So they have to be released at the same time. Is my understanding correct?
Yes. Sorry. The volume snapshot delta and what are combined?
The client Go library.
Yes.
Right. Now my question is, how so I need to manage. I as a backup software, I need to manage my binary so that it links to the right client Go version, and then from there I decide which API version to use. That sounds like weird to me. Help me understand that, please.
It's no different from how you would do it with a CRD though, as far if I understand you correctly. So I think like we agreed that behind like so for example, behind this API, which is constructed and built by the API server, there will still be like a Go type, that says volume snapshot delta. There would still be like the whole like client Go being generated, V1 alpha 1, V1 alpha 2. So those would still be in place. And
it's not manual, right? It's not manually written, right? It's all CRD driven based, basically generated, right?
Yeah. And this is the one thing about like the like the entire Kubernetes API paradigms, right? At the end, like there needs to be like a group version kind, like a type, that has a group name, a version name, and a kind type, and then that maps to like it's not like some random unstructured thing that we can do. Like Kubernetes always requires some kind of resource type at the handling as well as the storage level. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Cool. So Xing, do you have any thoughts on this? How do you feel about it?
So if a backup software retrieve this information or do this post twice, does it always give the same output?
Yeah. So it would be. I mean, like as far as like the aggregated API server itself is concerned, it's almost like a pass through. Like it's like you give me a request, and then I just like send it to like the CSI driver, and whatever the CSI driver give me, I'll send it back to the backup software. So if the same base and same target, whatever the response comes back from the CSI driver side, would just be sent back to the backup software. It for some reason, if that changed by this on the far deep backend, then the backend server, the backup software will just see what comes back. The only thing extra that the aggregated API server would do is to find the volumes at the volume handle from the volume snapshot resources based on the base and target parameters, and then of course like the driver discovery resource to find which where the CSI driver endpoint is. But otherwise,
it should not change, right? So it's basically, so the post is almost like a get, right? Because so it's actually so actually 像前点 I like create snapshot. When you make the same call for the second time, it's actually supposed to give you the same thing. So so maybe this is similar to that. So the post is actually kind of like a get now if you call it for the second time. It doesn't make sense for that to change. It's the same snapshot handle. You give the same input, you should give the same output. So basically the driver for the storage backend needs to make sure those are idempotent.
Yeah. So like interesting that you brought up like the get I guess feeling to it. So we have some also like on our,
because create snapshot is the same thing. It's like when you call that for a second time, it's a get actually. It's not going to create another snapshot. Even for volume, the same thing, right? You create volume. You call create volume with the same input parameters 10 times.
Mhm.
It's not supposed to create 10 volumes in the backend. It should just result in one volume. So it's almost like a get when you call it the second time.
Yeah. So so you're saying like, yeah, so with the volume snapshot, the first request, the first time ever, like it will be a post, and then subsequent ones become get.
No,
Like
it's still a post, but just
okay.
you were supposed to get just one, the same thing. It's not going to create.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Got
in
it.
that case, this one, because this is not supposed to change. This is like, it's not like you're creating the volume, it's being created, there's something like that. This is just the snapshot is already cut. The two snapshot, they're already there. You're getting the diffs, and then they're not supposed to change. It's not like when you call it the second time, you should change. They should not.
Yeah, it should not.
Right. So
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's kind of almost like get. It's not a get, but it's kind of like
Yeah. So during like the engineering call with Dave and Carl, like we have some like debate about should it be a post, should it be a list, should it be a get, like so one, if we in general, if we agree with like the general direction of not, so I think the key, so before we go into that, I think the key thing here is like if we can all agree with like not persisting the volume snapshot delta, and then just so the first point is not persisting it, and then the second point is definitely being like it would be idempotent, and then the third point being like the controller will have to do more work with managing the pagination and stuff like that. So if we can agree on all these 3 points, then I feel like we have a way forward for the cab.
So I just want to think about this one. So actually, should this just be a get then rather than a post?
Yeah, so let's okay, let's get into that. Let me just write something down first.
I was thinking this is a little different from when you say create a snapshot, because you are actually creating a new object. This one is not really.
Yeah, so it's more like
new, isn't it?
Yeah, so we have some let me just write this down first.
Is there any problem if do we have to do a post? Is that, I just want to see what's the problem if we just say this is a get.
I think you need a UID for that.
Yeah.
You need
and also
what?
like an object, like a UID, and then sorry.
Okay. So you're saying that we do need to have that.
Yeah, I can show you some notes that
created this object, but yeah.
Yeah, so I think like we talk about like, so this is more or less the same deal, but we changed the pose to a list just for like the sake of discussion and exploration. So with list, so if we, so whether it is so we can't, okay, if we want, we can't do a get. So if we do a get, like Carl was saying, like
ID.
you need an ID. So otherwise it will say I can't.
Yeah. That's true. Okay, that's a no. Okay.
Yeah, we can do a
but list is also weird. List.
So yeah, instead of saying like, hey, create this volume snapshot delta request or custom resource, we can. So I feel like so with this the approach, this one is said like, hey, telling Kubernetes like get me all the change block records related to correspond to this test delta volume snapshot delta. Like, what if we kind of explore a different avenue and say, hey, just ask like Kubernetes, specifically our custom API server, and say, hey, get me a list of change block records with the base related to this base and target. So I think like it's just, it feels like at the end it feels like they achieve the same goals that we talk about. These 3 key points here. But the semantics is slightly different, and one of the key things that came out of during our like in engineering discussion is that like with lists, like we can't pass like because list is it maps to a get verb, right? So I think technically we shouldn't like post like a body payload inside the request. So we may have to rely on something like a query parameters that got attached to the URI, and then or we can try to realize something like we can try to like use something like called field selectors. I don't know how many of us are familiar with that, which is different from label selectors, but there's like just some, from what we explored, there's some limitation there. So I don't know if like folks have like opinions about whether we should post like a body payload, or we should try to send a list but get like and knowing that we have to so we no longer have something like this volume snapshot delta. Like we just kind of like just almost remove it completely, and then we just say, hey, list me a list of change block like records or whatever we want to call it. And then we have to pass it in with as a query parameter, and then maybe the let me just quickly update this, and then the record just becomes something like it's like a list of all these things, and oh, come on, that like is pretty much like serve the same purpose, return the same satisfied all these 3 key points. It's just now a matter of semantic. Do we care about a post with a JSON payload, or do we want a list but with something like query parameters? And if we want to invest time into seeing how field selectors would work with this kind of, I guess, like virtual resources that don't get persisted and stuff like that.
Yeah, one just a little more coloring on that. So, we had looked a lot at list versus post, and the list, if you look at API machinery and look at the list options, right, it actually has interesting stuff about, how for the pagination, right, with limit and continue, define. But that field selector thing got us at the end, because the semantics are very unclear on that.
Yeah, by default, like field selectors have like, it's very limited in terms of what it can support in name and namespaces. And there's the core types, obviously. I mean, if we want to, I
pasted the link to the API machinery for that.
Yeah, I think, do we want to spend time, like see how this would work?
Yeah, no, I'm not proposing we do. I just said we had a lot of.
Oh, Carl, you went on mute. I think you just.
Sorry, yeah. I think the end result was, we prefer not to break out to raw REST API, and we want to be able to do this through kubectl, through standard stuff. If we go the list route, right, it would be very difficult to specify these field selector, these query parameters as field selectors. It's not clear it's going to be supported. So we'd rather stay with the existing machinery. That was our decision criteria.
Okay, so but with kubectl, you can't really do a kubectl get, right? So you just do a kubectl create. That's the only thing you can do, isn't it?
If we switch over to list or get, then we can do kubectl get change block records, for example. But now we have to it won't work directly, because we won't have, kubectl won't allow us to, it will have to be at the client go level. Like with kubectl we can't do like something like the query parameters, or like with field selectors, like we have to find how.
I was just asking, because Carl was saying we want to be able to use kubectl. So if we use post, what can we do? We can just do a create, right? What else?
Yeah. We can do a kubectl create and stuff like that.
Yeah, we just create a little YAML with the request, with the request, right? And do a create.
Can you see my terminal, or you see my web browser?
I see this slide.
Okay, let me share. I want to give everyone a chance to see what it looks like. Let me just try to. Sorry, Shanshan, give me 1 minute. So you should be able to see my terminal now.
Yes.
Okay, so you see, like, yeah, so if I use kubectl, so going back to the create, so again, Parker site create or get for now. So this is subject access review, which we talked about, right? So I can do a create here. And then, you know, like it would send back like all this payload from at the bottom of the screen, like all this payload from like the Kubernetes API server. So essentially we say, hey, go and get this thing. I mean, so go and create these things, and then you say, okay, I did what and then going back to the code path that I showed earlier, like it did all this RBAC authorization, and then it sent back the status. And then in our case, the status would just be all the change block records. So if I try to get it, and then, you know, it would just say, hey, this is not allowed, you know, rightly so, right? Because earlier we saw in the code that it only support create. And then the create just like, you know, it just essentially posts like, I'm sorry, just scrolling up here. It posts like all this like somewhere in up here, somewhere in this giant chunk of thing. It posts like a JSON body to the API server. So that's kind of the user experience that like we are going after. So whether so I guess I hope that clarifies like Xing's your comments about like kubectl get, kubectl create a little bit. Like of course on the backup server side, it would be this equivalent of client go or client.interface dot whatever create, you know, this sort of things.
Okay. Shengqian, do you have any comments or just
No, I'm good. I already asked
okay. Okay, maybe I think it's fine. Maybe just can have post as the proposed method, but then just write down the list as an alternative that we discussed.
Sure, like with the list as the alternative. Okay, so that sounds good. I think okay, so great. I think we have a path forward for the cap. I can go ahead and update it. And then I guess like Xing, we will have to go through the cap review for 1.26.
Yeah, so update that and then let's try to have another review meeting, either next meeting or the one after that. Yeah, if you can update that.
Yep. Okay. Sure. That sounds good. Let's see. Okay. Cool. I think that's all from me. If like, yeah, after this, like, if folks have any questions about this, feel free to ping me on the Kubernetes Slack. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's amazing. Thank you.
So yeah, so thanks, Ivan. Now going back, I just want to give a quick update of Cozy. So Cozy finally made it to alpha in 1.25 release, and there's a blog that's going to come out. I think it's on the September 2nd. That's the published date. So take a look of this one if you're interested. Yeah. And then we move this this open issue from fund to the next meeting. Are there anything else you guys want to talk about? If not, that's it for today. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.